Okay, in this video, what I'm going to be walking you through is exactly how I took my very first agency client from the point where he was making 5K a month with 30,000 to 40,000 followers, all the way to the stage where he was making consistent 100, 150K months with 150,000 followers, and how we allowed him to buy his dream car, which was a Maybach, which you can see right there, and also just how we allowed him to have the freedom to travel, enjoy, and make a shit ton more content and much higher quality content as well. So let me walk you through it. So when we first started with Alex, he had 5K was his revenue. So the first month that we worked with him, we were coming in off the back of a $5,000 month. So not a lot of money, right? 5K. At the time, he was charging $300 a month. So $300 a month. So what I did is I came in, I looked at competitors, I looked at people who were doing the same thing as Alex, but were more successful. And what I realized was we were way undercharging, and we also had a heavily undersold to niche. So what I did is I came up with 3 packages. I came up with a 3, a 6, and a 12-month coaching program. And then I also came up with an exclusive 6-month, which was much more tailored to his audience. For the 6-month, I decided to price it at $1,750. You'll see why shortly. And for the 3-month, I decided on 2K, 3K, and 5K. And the reason I did this is I wanted to incentivize people to go for the biggest package. We had financing, so it was very easy for them to break it down. So the thought process behind this was, if I can get a shit ton of people to buy the 5K, I mean, we do 2 deals and we've doubled our month. We got a deal every 3 days. We've done a 40K month. We've done a 50K month. So for me, the quickest way was to increase the price because our fulfillment was really dialed and we had next to no clients. So we knew that we could handle a shit ton of intake of clients as well. And that wouldn't be a bottleneck. And the reason that we had the lower was so that we could price anchor the 5K. Because if I just said we only have 12 months, it's 5K. It's a lot of money. But if you're paying 2K for 3 months, you think 5K for 12 months, that's a fucking steal. And you're also getting a discount if you go for the 12 instead of going for the 6. So the way that I made the pricing was very tailored. And then we had a lot of people come to us for very specific things, which we had this package for, which was price anchored to make money and get those people in who didn't require the full fitness coaching program. Now, the other thing I did outside from the pricing was set up systems. So we got Go High Level enabled. We got him a CRM. So we had a CRM which was able to track everything, get all the data. We got all of the data aligned. So data was set up to be done properly so that we could track and manage exactly what was going on within his company and see how we could best tailor it to what he needed. We also set up Slack so that we could communicate with everybody, and Alex could also see the process, had all the Zaps set up so that everything could be tracked through the one platform in Slack. Then what we did is similar to Suits, we looked for our Mike Ross. We looked for the person who maybe didn't have the most experience, maybe wasn't the perfect fit on the outside. But what I did is I'd go very extensively into how to hire and hiring the right person for the right job. And what I did is I made 2 or 3 key hires. So I brought on 2 DM setters who were absolute weapons. These guys worked almost all day, every day. And what they did is they took Alex from the point where he was getting 1 to 2 calls a day. So there was a point where we were booking 38 calls a day. So 38 calls a day, right? And then what we had was we had a closer who I'd personally trained, who I'd personally mentored, who was sitting at around about a 40% close rate. So what he was able to do was able to take the burden of taking the calls off of Alex, take it onto himself, and convert at a much higher rate because he understands sales and he understands what he's doing. So we were booking a shit ton of calls. We were closing a shit ton of calls. So what does that mean? That means we were making a shit ton of money. And the only way that you can improve from once you have the right people hiring wise is to continue training them. So what I did is I had 2 training sessions a week with both the setters and the closers, and also any one-to-ones that were needed as well. So what I'd do is I'd work with the closers. I'd sit down with them. I'd say, what do you think your biggest bottleneck is? They'd tell me. So they'd say, for example, my closer said, my biggest bottleneck is objections. We'd sit together, we'd watch the objections, and I'd say, can I give you a different perspective? And then we'd look at his discovery, and we'd see, why is there so many issues coming up in the objections? And we'd see what's going wrong throughout the rest of his call that is causing the problems within the objections and within the call. And what we came to realize is a lot of times as reps is we blame something, but it's actually just a symptom. It's not actually the problem. So through my methods of training and through my methods of improving my sales reps, we managed to continue implementing what we were doing. As you can see, we got to the point where, well, these are done stats, but we got to the point where we were implementing everything and we were really dialed in, and we managed to get to where we wanted to be. And what this did for Alex was, so before we jumped on, Alex was doing the sales, he was doing the managing, right? He was doing everything. And he was also doing the marketing. So what we did is we came in and we took over this and we took over this. So that left Alex with just the marketing. And what that allows you to do as a business owner is scale to the point where you can get to the point where you have over 10 times what you had before. And the reason for that is, the reason that as a content creator, you're in the position to even sell a course is because you know how to market, you know how to advertise, and you know how to get followers. But your time is all taken up by sales, by management, by hiring, by firing, by training. When if you just had the time to focus in on the marketing and really dial in on what you're doing with the marketing, you'd be able to truly scale to where you want to be and where you want to get to. So what we did is we allowed Alex to focus on the marketing. And what that did was it allowed us to hit our first 100K month. But it didn't happen in the first month, right? The first month, we actually only did 60K. So what did we do, right? We reassessed, we looked at everything, and we realized that our bottleneck was we were booking a shit ton of calls. So we're booking over 50 calls every 2 days. So around about 25 calls a day. But what was happening was we were DQing most of them. So we just were not being harsh enough on the leads. We weren't being as proactive with the leads to qualify them money, qualify them intent, qualify what they're actually looking for. So what we did is we looked at what works. So we have tons of leads, right? Leads are not an issue. Closing wasn't an issue, right? Closing was fine. And the other thing that was working too was our marketing, our reputation. Our rep was getting better and everything was working as we intended. So we looked at this and we said, okay, we're DQing a shit ton of prospects. We're booking a ton of calls, right? But these two cannot go hand in hand. So you can book a shit ton of calls, but if you're DQing a ton, it means that you have useless volume. So what we did was we didn't fire anybody. What we did is we retrained. So we came up with new scripts. So we came up with new DM scripts. We came up with new parameters for every single rep that we got. What we also did is we worked with the closers. We worked on the closers. We introduced some downsells. So we introduced some downsells so that if there was any problems with the lead, what the closers could do is they could downsell them, make a bit of money, and worst case, we could refer them to free value. So why do we refer them to free value? Because with prospects, right? Let's say, so if somebody doesn't buy, so they don't buy, right? What happens is they go back into the ecosystem. So they watch more content, and then what happens is eventually they buy. So what we were doing was we were making sure that if somebody didn't close, we'd bring them back. We tried downsell them. If they didn't downsell, we get them back into the free value. And we try downsell them again. If that didn't work, we get them back on a call and close them again. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to create this revolving door of if you don't close the first time, you can always come back around and come back and close again. With the scripts, what we focused on was qualification, was qual. So we focused on qualifying as many people as possible, and we pushed the limits of how much we can qualify people. And what that allowed us to do is go from where we were before, a 30% close rate, to a point where we were closing 54% of calls. The reason for this was because we were qualifying everybody. We were over-qualifying people, to be honest. But what this allowed us to do was to let rip that next month. And what ended up happening was we came all the way back and we were back to the marketing. We carried on with the marketing. And where did we go? We did 96K. So we did under 100K again. You might be saying this isn't a very good testimonial. But bear in mind, this is 2 months on from 5,000. So 2 months on from 5,000, we have 20 times where we were to start with. So we sat down and we said, okay, maybe we can't do this. But the reality was, and the reason we weren't making it, is because we just weren't at a point to make it yet. We didn't have enough quality leads to get there, right? So we were looking at the conversation, we were looking at the calls we didn't close, and we realized that a lot of these guys, the reason they're not closing is just because they logically can't, or they logistically can't, sorry. So what we did was we went away and we brought in a firm. We brought in a more easy to get approved finance provider. And what that did was that approved our leads who were getting approved from around about 30% to 70%. And what that meant for us was that we were able to almost double the amount of people we were closing. What we also did was we looked at the setters, and what the setters were doing was good, but one of them didn't want to be a setter anymore. He actually wanted to be a closer. And I could tell that in his performance, he was letting it slip. So what I did is I promoted him to a closer. And I said, if you make this work, you can stay as a closer, right? So internal promotion was a big thing for me. And the other setter, he didn't want to be a closer. He didn't want to be a setter either. So what I did was I promoted him to setter management. Because I'm good at what I do, but I'm not a one-man band, right? I can't do everything. So I promoted him to setter management because he'd been in the DMs, he'd set a ton of calls, and he knew what he was doing. So with my two good setters now as a closer and as a setter manager, we had to go back here. And what we had to do was retrain. So we hired 4 new setters. So 4 setters. And these guys were all not trained by me, trained by somebody who'd been in the DMs on this offer. So my setter manager, he now trained all 4 new setters. And what we had was 4 setters who knew what it taked and were ready to qualify who was needed. Then what we also did was I trained the setter. So I trained the other setter into being a closer. And what ended up happening was in his first week, he actually did 10,000 cash collected. So 10K C. Now, if you remember back to the start of the video, so he did double what Alex did in the first month before we were there by himself as a new closer because we trained him right and we had him all set up to do as needed. And what we did that month was, again, we let it rip. The marketing was going as usual. And what ended up happening was we hit our first 100K month, right? And then from that 100K month, we had 2 options. We could carry on and keep scaling as we did. And we got Alex to the point where he was at 192K followers. What you can do from there is you can launch paid ads. So you can launch follower ads or you can launch cold traffic ads. So what we did is we started running follower ads. And what that does is that then boosts your engagement, boosts the amount of followers you're getting and gets you more followers who will watch your content, engage with you, and get to the point where they buy. We didn't go down the cold route because what we were selling was extremely personal. So the last thing we wanted to do was get people in cold because there'd be a huge lack of trust. So we went down the follower route. Then what we were going to do is bring in a CSM. So bring in a CSM to help Alex with the fulfillment. And then from there, what the game is you continue to scale till you get to that 1 mil a month mark. For more agency content, drop me a follow, drop me a like, and I'll be dropping more. In the next video, I'm going to show you how I took a trader from making 80K a month right the way up to where he is now to on pace for 200K.